Hey, Ben here with Studio on the Lake. Hey, here's an interesting deal that I cleaned up my computer and ended up, I did a bunch of footage of this earlier, but this is a woodcut. I talked about woodcuts when we did the history of Santa, and I did this over right around the New Year, and I just finished it up the other day, and all you're getting is the end footage. There's the board, so this is a woodcut. In the old days before printing, they were not able to reproduce a drawing, so they had a wood carver do an image, and you can tell those images in a lot of the older books. I took this all the way from a flat board, and there was a little bit of interesting stuff. I just traced out a dove, and then removed everything down to about, probably 1/8 of an inch below that. And here I'm mixing up some epoxy, because you can see the wing just on the upper left, well, right there where I just put it, that broke or chipped as it wants to do with the wood grain, and then I wanted to redo part of his beak above there on my left hand. So I'm putting the wood epoxy on there, and I went back to find the other footage, and I didn't have it. So I thought I'd throw this out there anyway. It's a little video short, and it tells you how to do a woodcut. Now, you can do this in linoleum. I've got some around somewhere. Typically, you put a piece of paper on top of this, roll ink over it. India ink, typically they use. And I'm just cleaning up the outline. So everywhere that there's an outline on here, if it's smooth, it'll show up smooth. If it's got a booger in it, it'll show up as a booger on the paper. And how to fix these, which I didn't do with this one, is you'll take a print off of it and see how the print is doing a reading, and then you can go back and fine tune. And one of the ways to fine tune is to put that putty on there and fill up the low spots. So if it's high on here, when you put the ink in, it's going to imprint on the paper, and if it's low, it's not going to. And this ends up being a working piece as you go along with these things. So, and I apologize for all the early footage. I cleaned up my computer. I've got probably 10 terabytes of video through a couple different external hard drives, the main hard drive. And when my big computer, which is only 2 terabyte, gets filled up, I go ahead and delete those. Well, in the process, somewhere over eager, I deleted a lot of the footage, early footage of this, and all I have left is goofing around with this a couple days ago. So I'm just cleaning up the outlines there, and you get the concept of how a woodcut is done, and it kind of makes sense to you. They don't want them to be overly complicated. It's much easier to do on a block of linoleum, a wood print block, which they make in various different sizes. And if you're interested, leave a comment down in there and I'll show you how that's done. It's usually done with a V-gouge, and then you just take the back away, and you don't get too fancy with the carving. Well, the woodcuts in and of themselves, you can still, if you're over in Europe, you can find these at Trotel Marts, which are equivalent of flea markets, or Flow Mart, which that's the two words they go by. And they have some fantastic antique stuff. Europe, of course, being many years older than the U.S., but occasionally you can find a woodcut. And wood does not handle the ages very well. Obviously, it starts to shrink and get cracks in it and stuff. But there's some neat old wood prints that turn out to be a nice piece of art if you throw it on the wall, because they are art. But they just the printer would commission a piece to a wood carver, and he'd knock it out, and they'd fine tune it. So I'm just cleaning up the edges, and I feel kind of bad about losing the early footage, because it was sort of fun, but not really in the genre. And I did not go back. Those 2 patches I put on there, I did not. I let them harden a little bit, but I didn't go back and carve them. I wanted to pull a print off of this and see what it looked like, and then I figured that was good enough to show you what I was up to. And this was intended to be the first video of the new year, and it obviously didn't make the cut. So I throw this out as a short for you guys. And I figured it needed, if you were doing it with chisels, and I did a lot of this early work with chisels, you would scallop the outside of this bad boy so that you had a complete frame around the print. But you can see from the concept of this how a wood carving might be, or woodcut might be interesting. There are artists out there who make woodcuts and linoleum cuts and block prints, and then they sell the print that comes off of this. Obviously, you can use 2 or 3 or 4 of these with the same kind of concept or pattern, and use a different color on each one, and then reprint the paper over and over again, and you get kind of like the old lithograph 3-color printing. So a lot of artists will do a woodcut to showcase their artwork. Now, this is a true negative image, and ironically, if you're doing letters on this, they need to be done backwards. So, because it's a mirror image that's pulling off of there. And if you were to print it up as, or just as you're reading it on the wood block, the letters or whatever you put in there, when you pull the print off there, it's going to be backwards, just like you put it up to a mirror. And when you're a kid and you did the secret decoder stuff with letters printed backwards. So I'm going to finish up the outer portion of this, and then you'll see. I looked briefly around the studio, and I looked in the bedroom at the house where I've got some stuff stored, and I couldn't find the box with the woodcut prints in there, and they're linoleum blocks, and I've got several of them that I've done over the years. You could stamp out a label for your carvings. You can stamp out a business card if you are so inclined. And as I said before, typically it's done with India ink, which is relatively thin. So here, I'm not concerned necessarily about what's happening down in the background, which has been relieved away on this, because that's not going to print. The paper's going to hold up above that. But you'll see in just a second when I get to the point where I'm starting to put this together and pull a print off of it. These are kind of fun, but also very frustrating. In any little part of it, sometimes you can't get it to read, and when you do the printing. And of course, one way to fix it is like I showed you with that wood print. Now, if you're using a linoleum block, you have to use kind of a rubber stuff on there, because what they do is you take a block of wood, take a piece of linoleum or rubber, and laminate that to it. You can pick those up at the various different art supply stores, Michaels and whatnot. And then this is paper. Ink is put on with a roller typically. And again, I have those, and but I didn't. I wasn't able to find them. So I wanted to get an example of this thing out for you guys to see. So there's that. You can see if you didn't do any printing on it, you would you have kind of unique wall art in itself. I'm running an orbital over it real briefly here, and I'm just lightly going over. And at this point, you can see as the orbital comes across where your low points and your high points are. You want it all to be pretty much the same level when you go ahead and ink this bad boy up. So I just grabbed, I didn't have the India ink, obviously, and there I wasted a bunch of Joe Sonia acrylic paint. I didn't, out in the studio it's cold, so I don't leave paint out there typically because it tends to freeze. So I have a almost gone can of shellac, and poof, there we have a plate or a palette, for lack of better reference. This acrylic paint dries pretty quick, so I'm gonna put it on as wet as I can, and typically this would be done with like I said, with a roller. You got a glass plate that sits next to you. As with anything else, there are tools that work for this sort of stuff. This is probably the linoleum that you were to use instead of that block of wood that I have. You could get away with using flex cut tools. I'm not a big flex cut fan for using on wood. I know a lot of people they like them and they're very successful with them. I prefer the traditional carving knives and chisels and that sort of thing, as opposed to the flex cut. So here I'm trying to work pretty quick and keep this thing wet. And this is not necessarily the way to do this. I suppose if you can, if you don't have the roller, it certainly works without that. I mean, you don't need to invest in all of those tools, but you could set up a whole station just for doing woodcuts, and that may or may not wash out of my pants, but I don't care. As you know, that I have clothes that go out to the studio with me, and they get treated badly. So here I'm covering all the high spots. I'm not that concerned about the background in there. It's going to get muddied up as it goes along. As far as ideas on this, the gamut is all the way out there. And like I said, there are artists that are doing woodcuts. If you look up linoleum cuts or block printing, that sort of thing, this is basically a stamp. So if you've ever played around, or your wife played around with stamp kits, that's what this is. It's what you're building. I suppose if you're motivated, it's a good way to duplicate a Christmas card or something that you're going to send lots of out, or a greeting card. And it's just another form, and it was a way in the old days that the wood carvers made a living, because wood carving wasn't necessarily the hobby it is today. It was actually a guy who made a living doing this, and a printer would grab him. So I grabbed a piece of paper, and here's where you'd use a rubber roller across this. You'd obviously have it laid on a table. You wouldn't be sitting on your butt in a chair doing what I'm doing. And I'm kind of holding it in one place. If you're going to multi-print this, you could get fancy and put a frame around it that held the paper in a particular position, so you could put it back on a subsequent wood block that had a different color on it. Or you could, in reality, use the same block and just carefully paint a different color on there. I tried the quick wood to see if it would roll, and it didn't have enough give. That rubber roller actually has a little bit of give to it, and this seems to be working out. I can see it from working through that, just using my fingers, and that's what I'm going to do. And it comes out acceptable enough to give you the concept of this stuff. Now this tends to look a little cruder when you're done, although I kind of like the look of it. And here we go. So you set that bad boy off to the side. You might do a little light sanding on the next one to clean a little bit of that paint off, but poof, there you have a woodcut, and you see that it's a mirror image. As I said before, this was supposed to be the first video of the new year, I kind of thought, and then for some reason I didn't finish it, and I got sidetracked doing a bird, probably a baby bird, I don't remember, heck, or a wand. When you're doing a YouTube channel like this, you kind of need to go along with what people are following, and sometimes I ramble around in different places with different carvings and don't stay according to plan, and you can't, because you guys ask for stuff and I have to do that, or I feel obligated to do it. So there it is, and it's the wrong kind of paint or ink or whatever. I didn't go back and cut those pieces that I repaired out. But after you're all done, you can paint on this. You can do what I did there, which is sign it. You can customize each one of these for whatever use you plan on sending it out to. Like I said, if I can think of probably Christmas cards would be kind of neat with this. And this was supposed to be the first one. And unfortunately, it turned out to be halfway through the new year. But there it is. Anyway, Happy New Year to everyone, and thanks for all the subscribing. Go check out Jordy Johnson's channel, Just Carve Rob, Mark the Maker. The list is endless down below there. And if you want to see more of this woodcut stuff, tell me and I'll do it. It works out good for various different scenes. You can see on here how I could refine this, because this is the initial print off of there. And I would clean up some of the edges. I would take out that part that I fixed, and you can see I might draw a V-groove down through that thicker line. I would probably do some V-grooves down into that, and I would do that after I did the initial print to see what the print is reading. You can see some areas in the center there where the background printed, and it didn't want, you wouldn't necessarily want that, so you take those areas a little bit lower on the block, and that's pretty much it. End of story. Quick little video on what a woodcut is. I talked about it and said I would explain that to you at some point. So as always, just jump in, do the carving, and thanks a lot. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake.